Amid one of India's most challenging global and domestic economic settings, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the budget today. The capital outflows over the past year is something the government would seek to address in the budget. Investors will keep a close eye to see what policies will help do that. Now, the rupee has fallen from 86 to nearly 91.95 against the dollar. Foreign investors have pulled out over 29,000 crore rupees this past month, and employment-intensive sectors are under pressure. Home sales in major metros have dropped 14%. Affordable housing is declining while luxury home sales surge. These trends highlight structural fault lines in the economy. And despite these challenges, India is projected to grow 7.4% this year. Budget 2026 presents an opportunity to strengthen economic security and investment despite Trump's aggressive tariff stance. Experts suggest reviving the rupee by attracting foreign direct investment and monetizing idle public sector assets. An India Investment Summit would bring investors to India, while integrated townships on PSU land could drive urban growth, jobs and consumption. India also plans for Indra, that is a platform to monetize innovations from DRDO, ISRO and other research institutions. Regulatory reforms are essential as well, as projects still require up to 116 approvals, slowing investment and entrepreneurship. In a fractured global trade environment, India's budget must balance openness with protection. The IMF forecasts global growth at 3.3%, while India could grow over 7%. Public investment in logistics, energy and digital infrastructure is expected to rise. These are live visuals coming in, viewers. India's finance minister with the Bahikhata all set to begin Union Budget 2026. She's entering the house, and this is a quick photo op before she goes in. As scheduled earlier, she met the Indian President Draupadi Murmu at Rashtrapati Bhavan. And now, just before she enters the house, quick photo op outside on the stairs. Union Budget 2026, lot of expectations coming in from around the world as well. And of course, right here in India, the salaried class will be watching closely. Manufacturing sector, the defense sector, renewable energy sector, MSMEs and the auto sector, all tuning in very closely, expecting announcements to come in for their respective industries. We'll be tracking this very closely right here on WION World is One. Stay tuned right here with us. Now, to discuss this further, I'm being joined live by Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. Mr. Krishna, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the broadcast. Again, we're just a little over an hour away from the announcements to begin. Do you foresee any kind of announcements coming in regarding, the tax regime? Because that's something I've been discussing. A lot of ears are open to hear what it would mean for their regular salary. Let's just start there.
See, my feeling is this time not many changes would happen on the tax structure, especially for salaried class and so on and so forth. But I would expect the finance minister to herald a major change in the direction for the country if India has to emerge as a developed nation by the year 2047, when it turns 100 post-independence, right? So for that, some radical shifts are required, right? How do we become a developed country, right? I think, I know 1 year's budget can't address all the gaps But, a directional shift is very, very important, right? I mean, if you look at our Human Development Index ranking, we are ranked, 130th among 193 countries. If you look at the per capita income, we are ranked 141 out of 194 countries. So unless these parameters improve, unless the quality of life improves, unless all these things happen, becoming a developed nation by the 2047 would remain a distant dream on the horizon. And therefore, I expect the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to, at least, move in the direction of doubling the total spend on education. Right now, we spend almost 3% of our GDP on education, and this has to be doubled. I know it can't be doubled in 1 year, but that directional shift from a 3 to 4%, can she attempt doing it in this budget? Similarly, healthcare. We spend just about little over 2% of our GDP. I'm talking about the government expenditure on healthcare. Little over 2% of our GDP on healthcare. That also needs to become at least 3.5% of GDP, right? So these improvements are required. I would expect, like the 1991 budget where major economic transformation happened, she should announce, how do we transform our regulators in different sectors? Because today regulators are completely appointed by the government, controlled by the government. So they are not seen as fair, equitable, and independent, right? How do we ensure that the legal system for contract enforcement in the country, which everybody else thinks is quite weak, especially for foreign investors, I think how is that strengthened? One good thing which has happened, which I'm sure budget will also signify that, the rejigging of trade policies with major countries. I know US is completely not in our hands, but with all other economies, India is already moving in that direction and can, in some form, the companies which are adversely affected because of the trade barriers, because of a high 50% tariff which US has imposed, can the government do something to offset their losses because of fall of this
Mr. Krishna, let me come in there.
Disinvestments, these kind of things are, how do we make a headway for a direct tax code? I think these things are very, very important to my mind. How do we increase
Mr. Krishna,
technology?
Yeah, let me come in there. So you just mentioned the investments coming in from different countries and our own trade agreements as well. Just shortly before you had joined, we had a guest joining us from Los Angeles, and I asked him an international perspective, and the first perspective came in that perhaps India needs to stop dealing with Russia so that things get better with the US. I just wanted to, bring this up with you because this is a mentality. I asked an international perspective, and the perspective I get is from the US. I understand he was joining us from the US, but I had to remind him that there are other markets around the world because India has made it happen. The free trade agreements have come in from the UK, they've come in from the entire EU now. And at this point, do you feel India should also be looking towards the East?
Yeah. Why not? I mean, countries like South Korea, countries like Vietnam, countries like Indonesia. I think Japan. I think these countries are also very, very important to my mind. And I fundamentally believe even China, right? People always have this factor that no, India can't do business with China. I mean, and China will always have an element of distrust. But I think I am all for a greater integration of Indian economy with that of China. I think India stands to gain much more than just rallying around the US. I think that's very, very important to my mind, but that's a subject of a different debate altogether. And I don't think budget can do much in that direction. But definitely India should also start looking east towards east. I think that's very, very important. Many things, how do we improve the ease of doing business in our country? How do we ensure that, some of the world's most polluted cities which are in India, I think that problem is tackled in a big time. How do we ensure that the Smart India mission, because a lot of development happens around urban entities, around cities,
Understood.
These 100 smart cities, how do we take it to the next level of maturity and capability? I think these things to my mind are very, very important. And I would expect the finance minister to make a major announcement which should, herald a directional shift towards India becoming a developed country.
Yeah, that's
Otherwise, it will remain a political slogan.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to understand also from you, Mr. Krishna. How much do you feel this budget is going to address India's larger vision of 2047 and where it aims to be and wants to be by then? How much of it will be addressing the issues that are here right now with essentially the administration in the US and the tariffs coming in?
Yeah, so I mean, I said, budget cannot do much in terms of having on a bilateral trade agreements and so on and so forth. But it can also talk about a direction that yes, this is what India has done so far with Australia, with UK, with European Union, with the UAE. And this is the road forward in terms of more FTAs with more countries and so on and so forth, so that the loss we are incurring vis-a-vis fall in trade with the US, because Indians can't export it except the sectors which are kept outside, like smartphones, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and so on and so forth. So I think that announcement is important, that this is how we are trying to tackle the problem that we have with the US, where the trade deal remains elusive despite so many rounds of negotiations which have happened, right? But also I think India in the long term has to look at reducing some of the non-tariff barriers also, which many people while doing trade with India face. So I think these kind of changes, to my mind, the budget should announce, rather than very transactional changes, making a few basis point change in terms of spend in different sectors here and there. But larger issues which would, it should, to my mind, it should be some kind of a roadmap for India to become a developed nation by the year 2047. That's very, very important. I mean, bits and pieces government has addressed it, but not as holistically, and let this budget be an opportunity to address that aspiration of Indians holistically, to my mind, Shivam.
Understood. And, address the larger cause, the larger vision, instead of addressing country-wise issues. That need not be what drives the budget. The budget should be driven by the larger vision. That's what, I would agree with you on that. Let's wait and watch. It's a little over an hour from now, and we'll be connecting with you a little later in the day once everything is out, and we'll discuss this further. That was Jayant Krishna joining us on the broadcast. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Bye.